This is every single fight to make next after Jon Jones' retirement and UFC Fight Night Baku, Hill versus Rountree. I've got all of the key fighters from that card and Big Tom Aspinall on the screen right now, and you may notice there is an empty box next to all of them, and that's where their next opponent's going to go, who I have hidden around the perimeter of the screen. I'll slowly reveal those opponents one by one as the video goes on and place them where they belong on the screen. Let's start straight away with the undisputed heavyweight champion of the UFC, Big Tom Aspinall. Out of the UK, out of England, Tom Aspinall, the undisputed UFC heavyweight champion. I mean, these days, I used to dream of these days a year ago. It's been a year that we've been dealing with this situation. I've made about 70 videos about the Jon Jones, Tom Aspinall situation over that year. But you know what? It was worth it in the end because justice was served. Jon Jones is gone. No one cares. Aspinall's the undisputed champ. We can move on. Now, spoiler alert, this opponent I'm about to put against Tom Aspinall is not Jon Jones. And Jon Jones is ecstatic about that. But we as fans are not. I wanted to see Tom Aspinall versus Jon Jones. And I think a lot of all people on the side of Aspinall here wanted to see Aspinall versus Jones. People on the side of Jones desperately didn't want to see Aspinall versus Jones. Which is a weird thing because now Jon Jones' haters are happy that he's retired, but people that love watching Jon Jones fight are really happy that he's never going to ever again. So, really weird situation, honestly. I don't know how that works out. But either way, Tom Aspinall is going to be fighting Cyril Gane. It's not going to be in Ngannou. He's still got a fight in the PFL. They're not going to get that done. I don't think they'll sign him anyway because of the way that he left the UFC in the first place. That would be considered the UFC coming back to Ngannou with their hat in their hands. You know, that would be the UFC crawling back to Ngannou to apologize and say, no, we actually do desperately need you in the UFC. We'll pay you whatever. And that's just not something that the UFC is going to do. I would say that the UFC is not one to humiliate themselves like that, but they've done exactly that over the past year and a half for the heavyweight division. Tom Aspinall versus Cyril Gane's the move. I know Jailton Almeida was calling out Tom Aspinall. I think the move is, because Jailton's not that highly ranked yet, because again, he did lose to Curtis Blades quite recently, and he's picked himself back up and got some wins, but he beat Alexander Romanov and Sergey Spivak, and even against Spivak, there was a moment in the first round where he kind of nearly got TKO'd, and then he sort of made it back and finished Sergey Spivak at the end of the first round. And after Waldo Cortez Acosta just beat Spivak, that don't really mean that much. You know what I'm saying? I know that Cyril Gane is a guy who's beaten like Tuivasa and Spivak to get back to his title shots. Which is something that is very annoying about the way that Gane has been preferentially treated in the heavyweight division, but it works. Cyril Gane's a big name. I think they should do Jailton Almeida versus Alexander Volkov for the next title shot, because that would be a good contender regardless. And I think Tom Aspinall versus Cyril Gane need to fight out. There's a storyline here. That's something that we're not considering. There is a storyline in this fight of Tom Aspinall versus Cyril Gane, where one, everyone knows Cyril Gane because he lost to Francis Ngannou and lost to Jon Jones. So the fan base that knows of Jon Jones know about Cyril Gane. They're going to know about him. You know what I mean? So it's a name that people recognize. If Tom Aspinall were to fight a Jailton Almeida, even though Jailton Almeida is very dangerous, the fans that know Jones and think of him as like the person who can do no wrong and he should be allowed to retire and do this, they're the least knowing fans of the sport out there right now. They're the dumbest, most casual fans possible. So they would see Jailton Almeida as like some random can. Tom back to fighting cans at heavyweight, I guess. Lol. That's what you get. So that's what would be the situation. So it can't be Jailton Almeida for all of those reasons. It's got to be Cyril Gane. He's ranked highest in the division. With Jones out of the division, I'm pretty sure the division looks like Tom Aspinall at champ and Cyril Gane number one ranked. Even though he shouldn't have won that fight against Volkov. There was a robbery. That's what happened. So that's what we're going to be doing. So yeah, do Cyril Gane versus Tom Aspinall. It's England, France at the end of the day. You know, Cyril Gane represents France, Tom Aspinall representing the UK, right next to each other. There's actually a Paris event in September that's a fight night card. Now, there isn't a pay-per-view card in September. The UFC says because they couldn't find an arena for it, or they didn't really have enough time to set it up. I think it's because Canelo versus Crawford is in September, and they're posting it all on the UFC Instagram page. Don't get me started about that. That's why I think we don't have a September pay-per-view for once, randomly. Oh, I just couldn't figure it out for UFC Noche. No. Do the Noche card. Make the Paris card a pay-per-view. That's my move. You have the arena. You would go to the random arena in London the same way you would for a fight night, the same way you would for a pay-per-view. Right? It's the same arena. You're selling the same tickets. I reckon for the Paris card, they haven't announced anything for it yet. I don't think the tickets have gone on sale. Turn it into a pay-per-view card, because if you do, you already have Tom Aspinall versus Cyril Gane, and you have Nassourdine Imavov versus Caio Baralho, and you can have Benoit Saint-Denis versus another lightweight contender, and you can start piecing together a somewhat decent card. Couple good UK fighters on there. You can get Arnold Allen on there versus Aljamain Sterling on the main card, and you can all of a sudden start looking at a pretty decent pay-per-view that you can make out of putting Tom Aspinall versus Cyril Gane on top of a really good stacked Fight Night Paris card. So that's what I think they should do. Turn that Fight Night Paris card into a pay-per-view. Therefore, we have a pay-per-view in September, and we have localized promotion, which is Tom Aspinall, Cyril Gane, French, England. It's perfect. And they don't like each other. Cyril Gane's ducked Curtis Blades. He's ducked Tom Aspinall. I've made many videos about this where Cyril Gane just refused to fight them, and he would wait until they got matchups and then fight Tai Tuivasa to get his title shot. Remember that situation at heavyweight where Tuivasa dropped Cyril Gane in round 2, and if he would have finished him, he would have been fighting Jon Jones? And then Cyril Gane ducked him again and then ended up fighting Sergey Spivak to sort of try and work his way back towards the title. So there's some storyline there. It's going to be a bit heated at a press conference when this question gets asked of Cyril Gane. Tom mentioned before that you ducked him and you've turned down fights against him. What do you have to say about that? It doesn't matter what's said after. There's going to be some friction there. So this is something that we can promote, and this is something that we can have some tension and hype in the build-up of. That's what I think should happen next in the heavyweight division. And yeah, we'll move on. Khalil Rountree, UFC Baku. I want the full story to be told of Tom Aspinall, Jon Jones, though. In the promo of Tom Aspinall, Cyril Gane, we need it to be shown Jones blatantly ducking Tom on so many occasions, storming out of interviews when asked about him. If they don't promote it like that, Jones has something against the company. He has some kind of information against the entire company that could bring it down. If they don't promote Tom's next fight and how he became undisputed champion, as all of the moments that I've found over the past year of Jon Jones blatantly being a coward openly about not wanting to fight him, then they have missed a golden opportunity to create a star. So that's what I think should happen next. Moving on now. Khalil Rountree. Khalil Rountree won against Jamal Hill, and it was impressive, and he's talking about getting back into title contention. Listen, that all needs to stop. Okay, you've got Yuri Prohaska and Carlos Ulberg at the top of the division right now. Ulberg versus Prohaska should happen next. Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev 2 should happen next, which leaves, in my opinion, a good matchup that would be a very good stylistic matchup, and I think it would lead to a very technical striking match. I think they should do Khalil Rountree versus legendary Polish Boar. I think they should do Khalil Rountree versus Jan Blachowicz. That's the next matchup to happen in the light heavyweight division. Now, I know I've been talking about, maybe Dominic Reyes can get the matchup with Jan Blachowicz in the rematch, but I always value fresh matchups over anything else, because you should resort to a rematch. Unless it's a world championship fight and the champion lost and you want to give an immediate rematch. In the Pereira and Ankalaev scenario, it was a close fight. I always value fresh matchups, because once you do that rematch, if someone wins twice, you've burnt the idea of ever making that matchup again. It's very hard to justify a trilogy. So much so that the only time it's ever happened recently, I guess Holloway-Poirier it's happening. But when the fights were within a certain amount of time, it was Holloway-Volkanovski 3. That's how good you have to be to earn that trilogy while being down 2. And even that had controversy from the rematch. So I like fresh matchups. I want to see Khalil Rountree versus Jan Blachowicz. I think it's an amazing striking matchup. And I think it sort of times up well. Jan's in no rush to make a quick return. Khalil just had a fight where he didn't take too much damage, but he's going to want some time off. So I would say October, Abu Dhabi card. Khalil Rountree versus Jan Blachowicz is a really good fight. The winner of that can fight someone to get them their title shot. Jamal Hill lost in the main event against Khalil Rountree. Took a lot of damage to his leg. This is one of those times where Jamal, just take some time. Take some time and see how the division plays out. because he was right back in there after the Pereira loss against Jiri Prochazka. And then he was right back in there after the Jiri Prochazka loss against Khalil Rountree before you tell me, it was 5 months separated. They were supposed to fight in March, I'm pretty sure. And he lost to Jiri in January. Or was it April? One of those. Which means he was back in training camp like a month removed from the Jiri Prochazka loss. So I think Jamal needs to take time. I don't want to see him back in there until December. That would be the earliest I see him back in there. And I would put Jamal Hill against Alonzo Menifield. I think this is approachable for him. I think it's not someone who's going to have a game plan out there against him that's going to, chop up his legs or really work an efficient way of fighting against him and move too much for him or anything along those lines. This is going to be someone who's also trying to take his head off while he's trying to take their head off. And he's probably not going to grapple against Jamal Hill. If he does, it'll probably ruin his chances. I think Jamal Hill's a good counter-grappler. He proved that on his way up the division in the first place. But I think Jamal Hill versus Alonzo Menifield, it's time for one of those. Menifield just won a fight against Umar Sy, which means that he's now probably ranked somewhere around 12, 13, 11 in the division. Jamal Hill just lost. He's probably going to be ranked somewhere around 7 or 8 coming off a loss. So I reckon that's what he should do next. That's the matchup he should look for. I think this is an approachable matchup for Jamal Hill to win. This is going to be someone who's there to be hit. This is going to be someone who isn't following a meticulous game plan to figure out Jamal Hill and play on the back foot the entire time. He's going to give Hill opportunities and it's going to be a slugfest. So I think that's where Hill's opportunity is. Hill versus Menifield is what I would do. Rafael Fiziev, Ragnar Lothbrok. I was more angry at Ignacio Bahamondes fumbling than I was in his great performance. I watched it back. It was a solid performance from Rafael Fiziev. Better than I gave him credit for, especially that first round. It was clean. Rafael Fiziev versus Mateusz Gamrot 2. A matchup I've been wanting to run back for a while. In the past, with Gamrot's win over Klein, I think I matched him up against Arman Tsarukyan in a rematch next. I said that he should have called out Arman. He has a win over Arman. And that would be the only way to really justify Arman not being in any massive matchups anytime soon. So I thought the UFC would capitalize on that. But now it's looking more and more like Pimlet versus Tsarukyan or, Pimlet Gaethje and Tsarukyan versus Dan Hooker. And that's the thing. Dan Hooker beat Gamrot. So he earned more than Gamrot does in terms of a pick of a top contender. Right? And they're doing a silly Poirier-Holloway 3 dumbass fucking matchup. So I guess that's what's happening next. But Fiziev versus Gamrot, these are the two left out. Unfinished business. Gamrot was looking good in their first fight before the knee injury. In fact, Gamrot was outstriking Fiziev before the knee injury. Tough pill to swallow for a lot of people when they talk about Gamrot. He was outstriking Fiziev before the knee injury. And then the knee exploded in round 2. Fiziev was out for a while. But now he's back and he's looking better than ever. So I think Fiziev versus Gamrot 2 is the matchup. And the winner of this matchup can then start looking towards the top 5 of the division and start looking for a matchup that's going to put them in place to eventually get that title shot at 155 pounds. Moving on. Speaking of 155 pounds, Ignacio Bahamondes lost to Rafael Fiziev. A bad loss for Ignacio Bahamondes. He actually performed pretty well. Like, it wasn't a loss where you thought there's never going to be a time when Ignacio Bahamondes can go on and be something in a division. He got outstruck in moments by Fiziev. He actually got out-grappled by Fiziev in, moments of, physicality where Fiziev would just sort of, bowl him over at the end of some of the rounds to, win the round and land a couple of ground and pound shots. So Ignacio Bahamondes, he got crafty vetted by Rafael Fiziev. He got shown what it's like to take on a crafty vet that knows the intricacies of taking rounds and, playing out a full 3-round fight the way it should be done to make sure that he can win. And I think that's a learning moment for Ignacio Bahamondes. I was shocked by his fight IQ in some moments because I thought that he just was making really incredibly silly decisions at the end of some of the rounds, and even some of his lack of urgency to get back up from certain positions was so annoying to see. But enough complaining. Sadikov was also on this card. Nazim Sadikov. And I think it's just a no-brainer. Ignacio Bahamondes versus Nazim Sadikov in the lightweight division. That's a good matchup. That's a really, really fun, striking matchup between the two of them. And whoever knows one of them, as of their recent performance, If you know Nazim Sadikov and have just got to know Nazim Sadikov from his win over Nicholas Motta, you know Ignacio Bahamondes because he was only like 2 fights later on the very same card. So it's a matchup that people are going to be familiar with if they're familiar with Sadikov. And I'm sure Sadikov's gained a lot of, fans from Azerbaijan after his performance, because it was basically the only good performance of the entire card that actually like woke up the crowd. They were leaving after the co-main event. Yeah, I think all of those fans are now going to be aware of Ignacio Bahamondes as well, and they can put that matchup together, and I think it'd be a really fun fight, and they're on the same schedule. Nazim Sadikov's going to need some time off, not a crazy amount. He did take some damage, but he was more hurt to the body, and it's not like he had a really bad busted nose or massive. He didn't get concussed really badly. He got rocked, but he didn't get dropped all over the place and barely survived after being knocked down twice in the 3rd round. Like, there was none of that. It was a scrap. But Sadikov came off quite well from the scrap. Like, he didn't take too much damage. And Ignacio Bahamondes lost, but didn't take too much damage either. So I'm thinking this one should be played in November or October. 4-5 month turnaround. Probably a 5-month turnaround. November. I know Sadikov's also from New England. I think he's actually from New York. Because he trains with Serra Longo, doesn't he? Long Island, I think, something like that. So maybe if they do a New York card in November at MSG, which they normally do, they could run Ignacio Bahamondes versus Nazim Sadikov on there. That'd be pretty good. Moving on. Curtis Blades won his fight against Kuniev. I've rewatched it. Curtis Blades won his fight against Kuniev. He just straight up did. He won rounds 1 and 3. End of discussion. He lost round 2, and he took a lot of visible damage in round 2 as well, because his eye started swelling up and his nose was busted. He got cracked with some big shots from Kuniev in round 2. The amount of people I've seen calling this a robbery. Rounds are how fights are scored. They are scored by rounds. Kuniev may have done more to Blades in round 2 than he did in rounds 1 and 3 to Kuniev, but there is no way you can give Kuniev round 1 and 3 of this fight. It's just impossible. Blades won rounds 1 and 3, which means he won the fight. If you want to take it up with how we score MMA in general, have that argument. Don't start saying robbery based on how we actually score MMA right now. It's by rounds, and they were all 10-9, and Blades won 2 of them, and Kuniev won 1 of them. So Blades won, wasn't impressive. He's not going to get any sort of like luxury for this. I don't think they're going to be like, oh, Blades, what a performance, your title shot. Let's run the trilogy against Aspinall. But I think Curtis Blades, and hear me out when I say this, because you guys think this guy's going to lose to Sergey Pavlovich. Waldo Cortez Acosta. Now, the reason I'm putting Waldo Cortez Acosta's name there is, and his face there, I know it might have been a shock. I don't think he's going to beat Sergey Pavlovich, but I value fresh matchups. So this Waldo Cortez Acosta card just means any face at heavyweight coming off of some of these matchups. The Volkov Blades rematch could be good if Volkov beats Almeida, or even if Volkov doesn't fight Almeida and Almeida fights someone else and they do Curtis Blades versus Alexander Volkov too. That fight has been so far apart from the first fight that it would actually kind of make sense to run it back now, because they're both completely different fighters. But also the idea of a Pavlovich Waldo Cortez Acosta winner could be there for Curtis Blades as well. Blades is going to be used. He's going to be used against someone else who's on their own journey towards the title, and it's now Blades' opportunity to either upset that and put himself in the mix, or be the guy that they get past in order to get themselves in the mix. So there's a lot of matchups. Sergey Pavlovich versus Waldo Cortez Acosta's coming up. I think Pavlovich will win that. They've got Jailton Almeida. I think they're going to do Jailton Almeida versus Alexander Volkov, so that's likely going to happen as well. So yeah, Blades against any of those. Whichever one of those doesn't end up in a position to get a title shot again, that's going to be the person you put against Curtis Blades to make sure they earn it moving forward. Because I just don't know about it. Maybe if Derek Lewis beats Taliesin Teixeira at UFC Fight Night Nashville, which could very well happen, by the way. Derek Lewis is a much better mixed martial artist, and I actually might pick him to beat Taliesin Teixeira. I could see Derek Lewis versus Curtis Blades 2 happening. This is the thing. Even though they're ranked below Blades in the division, some of them have wins over him. So, that could be the leverage it would require to get Derek Lewis back into a big name matchup against one of the top heavyweights. Could be running back the Curtis Blades fight. So, or if Taliesin Teixeira wins. Run Taliesin Teixeira versus Curtis Blades. There are options, and that's what Waldo Cortez's fucking dumb face represents. No offense to him. I just hate the state of the heavyweight division right now. Mytek Bekoralblai. We did it again, dude. Woolly Mammoths. Now we're on to actual 3 wins against Fiziev, who was a really, really bad opponent. So it was a free win for Mytek Bekoralblai. Fiziev was considerably okay on the regional scene, but we are learning more and more that means nothing. You know, I mean, you could be someone who's not tested whatsoever in the regional scene. You either have it or you don't. And it doesn't really mean anything to fight decent level comp outside the UFC. The UFC is where it's at. We got guys that are unranked that are better than some of their champions of Bellator and PFL. So I think Mytek Bekoralblai, hear me out on this matchup. I like it. Nurullo Aliev. I like Nurullo Aliev versus Mytek Bekoralblai. They're from a similar region of the world as well. I'm not sure whereabouts. I think Mytek Bekoralblai is from Uzbekistan. And I'm going to say Tajikistan for Nurullo Aliev. I know it might not be ideal to put those guys against each other. But Nurullo Aliev is undefeated in the UFC. Beat Rafael Alves in his debut. Has another win since then, I think, against Joe Selecki, if I'm not mistaken. That's just off the top of my head. He doesn't have a matchup right now. So I think they're going to do Mytek Bekoralblai versus Nurullo Aliev. I think that's a good matchup. Nurullo Aliev has earned a guy who's decent, that's outside the rankings. I don't think Mytek Bekoralblai is now in a position to start looking for ranked opponents again. I think he's going to have to go back on a streak. Rebecki is good, but it wasn't Mytek Bekoralblai getting beaten by someone who was already ranked. If Mytek Bekoralblai's loss was against someone who was ranked in the top 15, I wouldn't be looking for this much of a reset for him. You know, I'd be saying, if he gets past Aliev right back in the mix, let's see if we can get him a ranked opponent again. But not everyone's Benoit Saint-Denis, so they don't get that opportunity where they can lose and get a top 5 or top 10 opponent after a crippling loss. So I think Mytek Bekoralblai versus Nurullo Aliev, and if he wins that one, then we can start talking about a guy who's just outside, maybe the winner of a Bobby Green, Carlos Diego Ferreira matchup. That could be there. So yeah, that's what I think should happen. Mytek Bekoralblai versus Nurullo Aliev. And as for Tagir Ulanbekov, Maxim could have won. I don't think it was that bad of a robbery. I just think those fan bases are feral. That's really what it comes down to. I think it was a very, very close fight. And I'm saying this about Team Habib, Tagir Ulanbekov, Dagestani guy. I'm saying this about that fight. I've rewatched it. He can win that fight. It was a very close fight. I know Maxim had the moments where he actually got the takedown, which was a big indicator, but Tagir outlanded him. He landed good shots on him. He was busy on the feet. He had moments where he had a submission attempt. I think Tagir could win that fight, but also Maxim could win. It was a very, very close fight. But to scream like it was one of the worst robberies they've ever seen. Gee, the Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, all of that fan base is so crazy. Even the Kazakhstan one for Shavkat Rakhmonov, they're just insane as well. But Tagir Ulanbekov, he won his fight, and I think it's time for him to get a test. I would put him against... who is this? I made this yesterday after the card. This is Ramazanbek Temirov. That's who this is. This is Ramazanbek Temirov, and he has a matchup against Dulev. Musayev. No. Almabek Talminev. Mumblek Blumblumblumdim. I can't remember the guy's name, but he just lost to Manel Cap. Asu Almabayev. It's all in there somewhere. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. This is the thing about being an MMA fan. If you're a true MMA fan, the names are in there floating around. You just got to find the right thing to say first. You name an opponent, you know what name sounds good next to it on a poster. You know what I mean? Asu Almabayev is who Ramazanbek Temirov is fighting. And I think that Ramazanbek Temirov is going to win. And that fight's coming up pretty soon. So if Ramazanbek Temirov wins, I reckon they could do him versus Ulanbekov. And the winner of that one can get one of these top names, like a Manel Cap, like a Royval potentially coming off a loss, or a Moreno, who knows, he might be coming off a loss around that time, or a, Cara France coming off a loss to Pantoja. One of these situations unfolds. The winner of this Ulanbekov-Temirov matchup can get the opportunity against one of them because Tim Elliott's booked up against Kai Asakura, so he can't be used as a stepping stone right now. Tagir Ulanbekov, Ramazan Bektemirov, if Ramazan Bektemirov beats Asu Almabiev in the flyweight division. I think that'd be a good one. Flyweight's great. Flyweight's getting good, honestly. I'm so glad they didn't cut that division because there's so many fun matchups coming up at flyweight. They're actually saving the UFC right now, but not these guys. Temirov's pretty fun, though. But we move on to this guy. Seokhyun Ko. He beat my boy Orban Elliott. It's tough, but we'll get over it. You know what I mean? We'll move on. We're 3-1 in the UFC now. Hey, yeah, I mean, that's still great. That's still a great record in the UFC. And it's going to be 4-1 real soon. And we're going to be back on track. But Seokhyun KO won against Orban Elliott in his debut. That means he's not going bottom feeder next. You know, Orban Elliott is going to have to take a step back down. Give him Tim Means. You know what I mean? Give Orban Elliott Tim Means. Hey, can a brother get a Clay Guida matchup? Or not a Clay Guida, I always do that. Can a brother get a Court McGee matchup? Like, give him some Chiesa treatment. You know, let's get Orban a free paycheck. But in the meantime, Seokhyun KO is going to move on up the division. But not up the division. He made his debut. He beat Orban Elliott, which immediately puts him in a position to where he should be taking on Austin Vanderford, I guess. A name. You know, I think that made a splash. Seokhyun KO coming in as a big underdog, performing the way he did, looking really, really impressive. Austin Vanderford recently fought in the welterweight division against, not Azamat Bekoev, but one of these types of names in the welterweight division, and he won his debut against him. So I think Austin Vanderford versus Seokhyun KO could be a good matchup, and the winner of that one can start looking towards the Randy Brown area of the division. Who else is around that area? Like Jake Matthews, one of those type. Michael Chiesa is a stepping stone opportunity. One of those situations. So I think that Seokhyun KO versus Austin Vanderford would be a good one, and Vanderford has some name value as well. So you should get someone who just made a bit of a buzz in their debut, I think. So those are the matchups I would do. That's what I would do next. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Toodle Pip. I'll see you later. Goodbye.